Welcome again to the Southern IPM Hour. Today's episode, we'll call it, is on box tree moth. And if you are here for box tree moth, you're in the right place. So welcome, we're glad you're here. As people continue to filter in, feel free to let us know in the chat who you are and where you're from, and also who your organization is. So welcome. The Southern IPM Hour presents research issues and programs in integrated pest management from the Southern region, although I think that the box tree moth probably reaches much further than the Southern region. And it takes place on the first Wednesday of every month at 1 p.m. Eastern Time. So you can join us for the another episode every month. I'm Kayla Watson. I'm the Communication Director at the Southern IPM Center, and we are one of 4 regional IPM centers supported by USDA NIFA Crop Protection and Pest Management Regional Coordination Program. We're housed at NC State and UGA, and in collaboration with regional stakeholders from multiple sectors in agricultural, urban, and rural settings to identify and address regional priorities for research, education, and outreach. And of course, we've been charged with a mission to coordinate IPM across the region, which is what we hope to do with this webinar today. I did want to mention that we are now accepting nominations for our Friends of IPM Awards program. We are recognizing those with extraordinary contributions to research, extension, and teaching in IPM. And there are both professional and graduate student categories. And you can see all of that at southernipm.org. The deadline for those nominations is October 1st. And this is open to practitioners, there's teachers, it's all kinds of great categories. So it's not only people that are in academia, which is really cool. I did also want to say thanks to our partner, and that's the North American Invasive Species Management Association, or NAISMA. And NAISMA is a network of professionals who implement management programs to prevent the detrimental impacts of invasive species to North America's lands and waters. NAISMA's mission is to support, promote, and empower invasive species prevention and management in North America. They have members in all 50 states as well as in Canada and Mexico. And getting involved with NAISMA is easy. You can join as a member or partner organization, attend their virtual annual conference September 27th through 30th, participate in National Invasive Species Awareness Week, and use their Play Clean Go outreach campaign and more. So if you want to find out more information, you can find that at naisma.org. That's NAISMA.org. And thanks again to NAISMA for partnering with us for this webinar. As we go throughout the presentation today, if you have questions, we ask that you type those questions into the Q&A panel that's located on your Zoom control. So you can see that at the bottom of your Zoom screen. And we will be addressing those questions at the end. Today, for our speakers for our box tree moth presentation, we have Alan Proxmire. He's a National Policy Manager in the U.S. Department of Agriculture's Animal and Plant Health Inspection Service, or USDA APHIS. And we also have Stephen Long. He is the Assistant Director of the Department of Plant Industry at Clemson University. So first up today, we have Alan Proxmire. He's a National Policy Manager with USDA. He's worked with APHIS for over 12 years. He manages several programs such as the European grapevine moth, the box tree moth, and glassy-winged sharpshooter. He is a native of Ohio, graduate of Bowling Green State University, and served in the U.S. Army. And when not protecting agriculture, Alan is growing it. He is a hobby farmer with chickens, vines, fruits, 4 dogs, and what he calls a spaghetti sauce and pickle garden. And in June, Alan took on the new role of father, welcoming his first child to the world. So welcome, Alan, and thanks for joining our webinar today.
Hey, thanks for having me. I really appreciate it. Today I will be presenting a little on Cytolema perspectalis, box tree moth. It's an invasive pest that primarily feeds on the boxwood, which is the Buxus species, as you all know. Next slide, please. You'll have to forgive me here. I'm working very remotely. Boxwoods are typically planted as ornamentals, as you'll see here. for edging, for hedges, and clipped into these ornamental topiaries. The box tree moth can cause heavy defoliation, as you see in the second picture. And if left unchecked, eventually the plant will die, usually within about a year. Next slide, please. If no foliage is available, larvae have been observed feeding on the bark, which can cause branches and the entire plant to die. In the United States, boxwoods have an estimated value of over $140 million, according to our friends at American Hort. Older boxwoods can have a historical value that is a cultural value. Sometimes you see them like at Mount Vernon, I believe, has a lot of boxwoods. And of course, it's hard to put a number on these things. Healthy boxwoods can live more than 150 years. So some of these boxwoods have been around at Mount Vernon, for instance. And unfortunately, once again, just to drive this point home, if left untreated, eventually the plants will die, usually within about a year. Next slide, please. So I'm going to talk a little bit and then get to this map kind of here in a few minutes, and first talk a little bit about the history. So the box tree moth is native to Asia. It's not found in the Western Hemisphere naturally. The pest was first reported then in Europe in 2007, where it spread very rapidly, even into Western Asia and into Northern Africa. In 2018, it was documented in Canada for the first time, and the rate of spread has kind of varied since its introduction in Europe is a little different from the introduction in Canada, but there are some cases that peak at 96 miles per year. Long distance movement of the box tree moth across Europe occurred primarily through the movement of infested material, that is to say, through the nursery pathway. And our map kind of shows how that could happen. Box tree moths are highly mobile and good flyers. The natural spread of the moth in Europe was documented at about 3 to 6 miles per year, although there were studies that were suggesting on the wind currents and certain environmental factors that could spread over 20 miles. Needless to say, it's become a very serious pest in Europe, and it continues to spread there. So getting to the map, USDA APHIS has confirmed the presence of box tree moth in the continental United States, up there in Niagara County, New York. We've implemented an emergency response to the fines, and we are working to eradicate the pest. So giving a little back history on that, between August 2020 and April 2021, a nursery in St. Catharines, Ontario, shipped some boxwood that may have been infested with box tree moth to locations in 6 states. 25 retail facilities in those states, and then another distribution center. So in total, I believe 7 states. On May 26, 2021, APHIS issued a federal order to halt all importation of host plants from Canada. That includes boxwood, euonymus, and holly. We also deployed our incident management teams over the course of those 3 months to support the response that we had. They worked with our state partners in those 7 states to trace all that material, the potentially infested material. And so getting to the map, what it shows there, the star shows the infested material origin in Ontario, and then the circles show the destinations and where we were performing trace activities. So as part of that, we safeguarded and destroyed all the plants that we were able to trace. However, due to like cash and carry sales, we were not able to find everything simply because there was no record to track down. We did and we are supporting trapping efforts within the states. And did I catch everything, Kayla? Did I go back far enough and am I sounding okay?
Yeah, I believe so. You're sounding great.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
We're supporting the trapping efforts there at the states with that are higher risk for box tree moth based on this trace activity that we did. Part of our biggest focus is on the outreach material, not only material, but doing presentations like this and letting the public know what to be on the lookout for and giving them the information they need to report this pest. So we have reached out to members of the state departments of agriculture, their communications officers, extensions, master gardeners, the IPM centers, and we've shared our media kit, as we call it. So we're definitely getting the message out there. We've launched a radio media tour as well, which is geo-targeted online ad campaigns. And those are promoted on social media and target the higher risk states. So in addition to that, APHIS is coordinating with the affected states. We provided traps and lures for the surveys, and we prepared the outreach materials and are working with different entities there. So these immediate measures are focused on protecting the economic viability of the U.S. boxwood industry, right? From the nurseries all the way to the wholesalers and, you know, even the consumers, right, at the end of the day. 9 states are at high risk of having been infested from the Canadian boxwood plants because they received a higher number of these plants. And that 9 comes from some of the distribution, the states that were part of that distribution center. So those states include Arkansas, Kentucky, Connecticut, Massachusetts, Michigan, Mississippi, New York, Ohio, and Tennessee. So USDA and these state cooperators are surveying for the pest, but obviously we need the public's help. So we asked residents of those 9 states to keep an eye out and gave them the information to report the pest. If they spot the box tree moth or signs of the infestation, they should report it to their state departments of agriculture or directly to a local USDA office. Next slide, please. So this is a close-up of Niagara County and the border right there on the Niagara River between the 2 lakes there. So we have not found box tree moth stages in the environment in 8 of those 9 states we are monitoring. However, in New York, the situation is different. The New York State Department of Agriculture and Marketing and APHIS detected multiple life stages of the box tree moth in Niagara County. We announced this in last month, middle of last month, 8/18 to be exact. Surveyors found invasive moths close to the Canadian border where the Canadian Food Inspection Agency, CFIA, reported finding box tree moths. And I'm not sure if it's shown there on the map. Yes, it is. St. Catharines is right there, and that's where the original material came from. So we were fairly certain that we would find it up near there if we found it at all. So the moths in Niagara County have flown or been blown into the area from Canada and have not been traced to any shipments sent to the state. APHIS began trapping for the box tree moth in late July, and then we amplified the state survey efforts after the first detection. Excuse me. For reporting and available treatment information in New York, residents may visit hungrypest.com and click on the box tree moth banner. to open our webpage. The treatment information is in the resources tab. New York residents can also reach out to their local cooperative extensions for additional guidance. And the most environmentally safe precaution for infested plant material disposal is to double bag it and to place it in the household waste bin. If residents have a large amount of plant material to dispose of and not just clippings, they may call their local extension service for more instructions. Next slide, please. Adult box tree moths have white wings with brown border, but occasionally they may be the dark form, which has the all brown wings. And you can see that on the left and the right there. Both color forms have a small white comma-shaped spots on the forewing. The males and females show both colorations as well. Adults can lay eggs in flat clusters of about 5 to 20 on the underside of boxwood moths. Boxwood leaves. As those eggs mature, a black spot appears, marking the larva head. Next slide, please. Newly hatched larvae have black heads and are green and yellow in color. As they age, dark brown stripes develop on the body. They're pretty easy to identify, at least the later instars. The most mature larvae, more commonly known as caterpillars, are about 1.6 inches long and have thin white and thick black stripes and black dots outlined in the white along the length of the body. That's a hard description to say, but the picture worth 1,000 words. So, pupae may first appear in April or May and be present throughout the summer and into the fall, depending on the local climate and timing of generations. Adults first emerge from the overwintering generation, again, between April and July, depending on the climate and temperature. So subsequent generations are active between June and October. Adults typically live for about 2 weeks after emergence. So you can see there might be several generations in a year. Next slide, please. Here we'll play a little video while I speak over it and give it just a little bit of time for it to load here. So these videos come from Dr. Richard Roscoe, and that you can find them online. They depict different stages of the box tree moth. And in this video, we see mature caterpillars eating Buxus leaves. When inspecting boxwood plants for this pest in its life stages, look for the young caterpillars hiding in the twigs and the leaves. Signs of feeding include chewed, cut, or missing leaves, yellowing or brown leaves, and white webbing, which is usually the most prominent sign of infestation early on. And then there is also the green-black excrement that can be found at the bottom of the boxwoods. The female moths lay their eggs on the underside of the leaves, and there may be additional videos out there that may be useful. Dr. Richard Roscoe's YouTube channel, which he calls Photovolcanica, I believe is what it's called. He provides a lot of these videos, and you can seek those out. Next slide, please. So this is just our conclusion page. Obviously, I'll be available at the end of at the presentation to answer any questions you have. And before I hand it over to Stephen Long, the State Plant Health Director, State Plant Regulatory Official from South Carolina, I wanted to leave you with a few facts about APHIS and just what we're doing as far as the wider range of safeguarding protection. So in 2020, we inspected and cleared about 5 billion pounds of fresh fruits and vegetables, about 1 billion plants from 23 countries before they were shipped to the United States. We work with Customs and Border Protection, and with them, we intercepted more than 56,000 plant pests, and in the course of over 25,000 ships. So that's about the equivalent of 1.4 million cargo, mail, and express carrier shipments. So we look forward to continuing our success in safeguarding. Unfortunately, this was one that despite our safeguards that we put in place and having prepared for a lot of this, just got across the border. So I will turn it over to Stephen with that.
Thank you so much, Alan, for that presentation. We appreciate all of the information that you're sharing, and I think that our audience today will definitely find it useful. I did want to mention again that if you have a question, please put this into the Q&A box, and we will be answering those questions at the end of both presentations today. So you will have a chance to get those questions answered, and you can put those in now, you can put them in later, whatever you'd like to do. So our next speaker today is Stephen Long, and Stephen currently serves as Clemson's Regulatory Assistant Director for Plant Industry, and he oversees programs including nursery industry inspection, apiary movement inspection, invasive species, the Plant and Pest Diagnostics Clinic, the Asian Longhorn Beetle Cooperative Eradication Program, and an organic certification unit. So Stephen, sounds like you're a really busy guy, so I appreciate you taking the time to speak with us today. And he also serves on several national plant protection committees through the National Plant Board, where he's also the current president. So welcome, Stephen.
Thank you, Kayla. I trust you all can see my screen okay.
Looks good.
Yeah, I just want to say thank you for this opportunity. I'm not speaking today as the National Plant Board president, so I'm taking that hat off for now. I'll speak today as the state plant regulatory official for South Carolina. And it's a pleasure to be here and share with y'all a little bit about how we dealt with box tree moth here in South Carolina. And I guess just right off the bat, I'll give a little bit of a disclaimer and about our agency. If you're familiar with plant regulatory agencies at all, state plant regulatory agencies, you probably realize that nearly all of them are housed in their state departments of agriculture. The reason you'll see the tiger paws throughout today's presentation is that is not the case in South Carolina. Our state law places the state plant regulatory agency with Clemson, with the Department of Plant Industry, and that is with Clemson University. So that's the reason for all the tiger paws. I am a graduate, multi-time graduate from Clemson University, so I have other reasons to root for our Tigers, but it isn't just a football presentation today. So with that, I'll move on into the presentation. Thank you, Alan, for your presentation as well. There will be some overlap with the things that I share today with what Alan has already said, but I hope that my part of the presentation provides a little bit of a different perspective in showing you kind of what we dealt with at the field level. A few of the photos out there and just, I guess, just a glimpse of what the field survey looks like and how we handle that in South Carolina. All right, so again, some of the overlap that I hope matches well with Alan's presentation. You know, we got wind of Canada notifying APHIS and then the states about box tree moth being detected outside of their quarantine in late April and early May. And by late May 19th there, we were notified that there was going to be a trace forward event. And then we were told that South Carolina was going to be one of 6 states. And then that we only had one of the 24 facilities. So, you know, right off the bat, I thought, okay, one facility in South Carolina, how bad could it be? And admittedly, I did not know a lot about box tree moth at the time. Now I'm fairly read up on it as much as I can be with those other duties that Kayla mentioned. So, you know, we started looking into the event and realized that it was one of our largest shippers in South Carolina, and it was an internet, I guess not broker, but just an internet seller, and they do a lot of business in our state. So probably one of the worst case scenarios for a trace event like this. But I'll get into more of the details a little bit later. So we were notified that we needed to hold all host material. So at that time on 5/20, that was going to be all boxwoods, all euonymus, and all holly. That later was a little bit revised to just be boxwood. As Alan said, those three are known to be the host because it has been witnessed in its native Asia to feed on all three. I think in Europe and definitely in Canada and the US so far, we've only seen it on boxwood. So on 5/21, we reviewed the shipping records and inspected all of the affected boxwood shipments at our site. We did find 2 pupae samples, and were able to later confirm in late May that we were positive for box tree moth, and then went on to do a survey of about 21,000 plants. So that's kind of the 100,000 foot view of today's presentation. I'll give a few more details as we go. So here's a Google Earth shot with a little bit of writing. You can ignore the writing on this screen for the purposes of this presentation. But this is our nursery. This is about a 30-acre nursery, as I indicated earlier. Mail order nursery. They do nearly $1 million in business every day. And they do operate under multiple business names. So again, from a plant regulatory standpoint and a trace investigation standpoint, this was not an ideal scenario. And as you can note, we did have boxwoods throughout the nursery, not in just one location. So the affected boxwoods are going to be in this area here, but there are boxwoods throughout the nursery. And there are others not highlighted on here. There was a big group of boxwoods here and a big group of boxwoods here that we had to look at when we were doing our in-field survey. So getting down to the specifics of the South Carolina event, we were notified that 205 Canadian boxwood green velvets in the 1 gallon size were shipped to South Carolina. It pretty much goes downhill from there. When we arrived, again, as with many trace forwards, many times there have been plant sales before we can arrive, before we're notified and can arrive. Best case scenario, 100% of those are still there and haven't moved, but that's just not normally the case. In this situation, we had 29 of the 205 that remained, and those 205 had been commingled with other green velvet boxwoods that were no longer distinguishable from the Canadian plants. We think that we could differentiate them, but they had certainly been grouped together. You can see in this photo here on the left, this is what it looked like. So the 29 would have been just mixed in there. We could find and distinguish the 29, but if box tree moth is in there, it could move with ease from those original 205 into these other 1,571. So upon arrival, we did identify the 29 remaining and noticed that there was distinct webbing, which is known for box tree moth is known for on each of the 29. We did not find any larvae, but we did pull 2 pupae samples. And that's the only photo we got of the pupa. I wish we had done a little better on that, but that's what we found in South Carolina, and it was later confirmed positive. So next step in the process for us is double bagging, as Alan mentioned earlier, as part of the protocol. We double bagged these 29 boxwood and left them on site in the short term. These are some photos of us double bagging those. So again, very large nursery, a lot of boxwood. So then we come back for another round 2. Again, this is kind of developing along as an emergency response, and you're learning more and more as you go and what you need to do. And so those 29 quickly turned into 68 more. The 68 comes from the boxwoods that we felt the original 205 had been in very close contact with, and would have afforded box tree moth the ability to crawl from one plant to another. Outside of the 68 plus the 29, which got us right at 100. Outside of that, there was not an ability for the caterpillars to physically crawl from one boxwood to another. So that's where we stopped at with the destruction in the nursery, is right at 100 boxwood plants. So this resulted in a fairly large survey effort. We worked with our state plant health director, USDA office here in South Carolina. They were able to provide 3 USDA staff. I was on that inspection. There in the foreground is our spud for South Carolina, Ms. Meg Robbie. She assisted in that survey as well. So as I mentioned, we had to look at all of the boxwood in that nursery. I believe we also looked at all of the holly and all of the euonymus since we were there, which resulted in a hand inspection of about 21,000 plants. So that is pretty much picking up and pulling back the leaves and looking at every one of those plants. So a very labor intensive survey. We did get it all done in one long rainy day, as you can tell from this photo here. Where it got difficult was with the trace forward, and that's where the effort leaves South Carolina and went to the other states. As I mentioned, we only had 205 plants that we knew came from the Canadian nursery and arrived in South Carolina, but with those being commingled for several months with 1,571 other plants, the only way to accurately conduct a trace forward is to inspect every plant that the possible infested plants came into contact with. So that moved our trace forward up to 1,571 plants. And again, back to the reference of this being an internet shipper, they make many sales every day of very small quantities. So a lot of times with these trace forwards, especially if you're dealing with a broker or a wholesaler, you may see 1,500 plants go to one location, which makes your trace forward inspection pretty easy, at least as far as the logistics of going to one location and looking at everything. In our situation, the 1,571 plants went to 42 states and a total of 210 locations. So this resulted in a massive response by state and federal staff nationwide. So this is just a shot of our survey again. A little bit about following the protocol for destruction. The photo on the far left is deep burial on site. I believe I saw one of the questions in the chat while Alan was talking that referenced or questioned whether fire or incineration were an option. That was offered to us originally in the protocol. I think it's still offered now. I'll let Alan confirm that when we get to that point in the questions. But it was offered, but the problem with incineration is you have to incinerate the soil also, and it has to be reduced to ash. And that takes a pretty hot fire burning for a long period of time. And in this situation, the nursery is responsible for that destruction. So they chose deep burial. So here on the far left, we have deep burial on site of the 100 plants, and we watched those get buried. The next two photos here of deep burial off site is related to the trace forward event. So among those 42 states, South Carolina was one of those. We had, I think, 3 locations in South Carolina where these potentially infested boxwood were sold. So we were able to go out to those 3 locations, retrieve all of the boxwood, and destroy those. And we did do a deep burial destruction at a local landfill offsite. So just a little bit of an idea here of the efforts that a trace event like this causes. We're probably looking at, and this is just the Department of Plant Industry, so my staff, about 30 combined staff days. So that's about 38-hour days, probably 5,000 vehicle miles. The closest anyone on my staff was to this nursery is nearly 2 hours away. So a lot of mileage put on vehicles getting back and forth to this location. The deep landfill burial was actually very cheap at just $300 to put that down. And then, you also have the expense to the nursery. So we ended up being in that nursery, in a nursery of this size. We were a major distraction to them for 3 whole days, destroying 100 plants, which 100 plants to them is just a drop in the bucket. They didn't really care about that. But they did decide to participate in a replacement program, and they shipped out at no cost to their consumers about 1,500 replacement plants. In an effort like that, they're looking to salvage their reputation. We never asked how many of their customers are repeat buyers, but obviously that's something that's at stake for them, and it's always something that's at stake with a massive trace forward event like this. The only unfortunate part is that, excuse me. The only unfortunate part is the nursery did not let us know that they were going to provide these 1,500 plants. So many of the 1,500 plants that were provided as replacement plants were also destroyed in other states because of their association with the nursery. So we probably ended up with several thousand of these plants coming from the South Carolina nursery that had to be destroyed. And then again, future expenses are going to be multiple years of survey and trapping at this nursery. So just to touch a little bit on the trapping, we do have 10 to 15 traps placed in and around that nursery right now. Those have been getting checked every 2 to 3 weeks for about 2 months now. Nothing positive at this point. I don't even know that any samples have been submitted, but there certainly have been no positive detections from those trapping efforts. We'll continue to survey for many more years in the state, but specifically for 1 to 3 years in that nursery and in the immediate vicinity of that nursery, just to ensure that we did not have any box tree moth larvae hatch and escape and begin initiating breeding populations in the immediate vicinity there. Do want to acknowledge USDA APHIS for providing CAPS funding, Cooperative Agricultural Pest Survey Program funds for this year, but especially for the years to come, so that we can get out in South Carolina and other states and survey our nurseries just to ensure that we don't have any infestations that we haven't found yet. And there at the bottom, I threw in that part about New York. Alan already talked about that pretty extensively, but we do know that there is likely an established population there. I think it's possible that New York is going to implement a quarantine there, and we're going to continue to see that situation develop, and hopefully we can see eradication there. But I'll leave the rest of that up to our colleagues with USDA and New York. So with that, I'll conclude, and I'll pitch it back to our moderators and turn it over for questions.
Thank you so much, Stephen. Again, valuable information. I love having the representation from the state level as well and what you guys are seeing in South Carolina. So thank you again for that. And I do want to remind you, if you have a question, I think I saw somebody's hand raised earlier. If you have a question, if you could type it into the Q&A chat box, and we will get to those in just a second. Before we get to those, I would like to ask that you complete a quick poll, and this will help us here at the Southern IPM Center. If you could just indicate your level of agreement with the following statements, it would help us a lot to know that we're on target with what you need, and it'll help us with our future webinars. So while you're thinking of those questions, I'll give you just a minute to type that in. Hopefully it won't be too hard. And it looks like those answers are coming in now. I do also just want to reiterate that if you want more information about invasive plant pests, including the box tree moth, you can visit the website hungrypests.com, and you can click on the box tree moth banner on that page. Looks like the poll is still going. Okay. And yep, we still got some things coming in there. I'm going to just mention, if you want more information about the Southern IPM Center, you can visit our website, southernipm.org. And our next IPM hour is coming up October 6th at 1 p.m. And I'm going to go ahead and close this poll. So thanks for taking that if you did, and we will go ahead and go into the Q&A portion of this now. We have a question from Angela, and I think that Stephen did address this somewhat. I don't know if Alan at APHIS would also like to address this, but on these trace forwards, were infestations found just on boxwood, or were they also found on euonymus and holly?
Yeah, as Stephen said, we have not found any evidence in the United States that it's on euonymus or holly, and we're focused on Buxus alone.
Gotcha.
For the time being.
Okay, thank you. And I think Stephen got into this as well. What is the trapping method used for the box tree moth surveys? I don't know if APHIS wants to speak on that a little bit.
Sure, and I see Adam had also asked a similar question. We're actually using a bucket trap, and I forget the chemistry of the lure, but we make that at APHIS. And so it's your typical, I believe they use it on Asian gypsy moth, is the same type of trap.
Let's see. How are those traps placed?
So our protocol, we have a grid system placed, and I forget the distance of the grid, but it comes out to 39 traps in a half mile radius. And then we recommend no closer than 65 feet for the spacing of the traps. And then we also don't put them directly in the bush if we can. We'd like to put it just off the bush and away from foliage.
Awesome, thank you. The next question that we have is from Mary, and Mary is wondering, is burning the infested material a viable option? I think both of you mentioned burying it, but they want to know if burning it is a viable option.
Stephen, I feel like I'm taking all the questions here, but again, I'll tackle this one if it's all right.
All good.
Yeah, so burning is not one of our options simply because it involves transporting that material to an incinerator. In the case of what you're thinking of, maybe like burning it in a campfire at home or something, again, yes, we would like to have that material destroyed, especially for the larvae, the eggs, and the caterpillars, right? But for something like the moth, you might be disturbing it. So that's why we recommend double bagging it. For sure, if you're going to burn it at home like that, we would recommend bagging it somehow. I guess a paper bag would be the most appropriate way to go there. But somehow containing that pest so you're not shooting it off into the air instead of actually killing it, right?
Yeah, I can see how that would be problematic.
Yeah. Or treating the bush. You know, it's hard to tell homeowners that what we would really like is destruction of the bush so that material isn't there. So we're trying to recommend treatments, which you can find through Hungry Pest. There's several available at local stores and stuff like that. But as far as the green waste goes, we would like that double bagged and either left for the municipality to come and pick up, or as you said, a home destruction or something like that.
And Mary is also wondering, have any native North American or established imported predators found to be controlling for box tree moth?
We don't know of any, I believe that's speaking to like a biocontrol. We don't know of any sort of native species that's feeding on it. It's kind of unchecked at this point. So, but then again, the research continues. There may be a wasp or something out there, who hopefully, or something.
All right.
If I can add it, this is always the point where I like to say, biocontrol is typically a later option. Right now, I would say we're still in the eradication level for the U.S. So anytime we find it, we're not thinking biocontrol. We're kind of thinking, I guess, forgive the terminology, but scorched earth, get rid of it at all costs, just to save everything else. And then we'll get to biocontrols later once it's established and it's gotten away from us. But hopefully we won't get to that point with box tree moth.
I think this question might be better suited for Stephen, just kind of at the state level. Adrian is wondering if it would be possible to get identification cards to hand out to people. Like if you have any sort of things like that available. They mentioned having business size cards with picture information. on identifying spotted lantern fly, and it actually helps to have that to hand out to people. But they were wondering if it'd be possible to have ID cards for box tree moth.
And that actually might be a better question for Alan. A lot of times these things trickle down to us from USDA and definitely from federal funding. It's something that we would do in South Carolina, but ours would only be available to our own staff and our own residents. But a lot of times that still comes from federal funding. But it often Alan's program creates those as well. So I'll let him speak to that.
Yep, that's true. And while we haven't got this specific outreach material made yet, it's definitely within our repertoire for these kind of pests. I know specifically they use them on citrus pests and Asian longhorn beetle. So I would imagine as the program develops and we start getting that material developed, that'll become available. Definitely. It's good to see that people remember those and know about them and are wanting them. Thanks, Adrian.
All right. Just as a follow-up with the double bagging of the pest and left for waste disposal, there is kind of a worry that if the bags are moved and then torn open and then they stay for some time at the surface before they're actually buried, but you're still saving that this is the best way to handle these right now.
Stephen, did you? I have a response, but go ahead, please.
Yeah. Alan, you correct me if I'm wrong, but at least in South Carolina, I would assume it's this way in 50 states. Also, this is a federally regulated pest and one that we take very seriously. We actually don't want homeowners just bagging what they think is an infested plant and sending it to the landfill. We actually want to be contacted firsthand. So that I think the best advice is to contact your state plant regulatory agency and let them come out and do a survey if they have the resources to do that, and then they'll determine what the proper disposal method is. So yeah, I would say we wouldn't want to be telling people right now to be doing destruction on their own, at least not for what is suspected to be box tree moth.
Yes, and I'm sorry if I led people astray there with one of the questions about asking about a home fire. That one kind of threw me off, but that is true. As we've said throughout the presentation, if you see boxwood moth, please report it. Box tree moth, please report it. And the double bagging is the safeguard. We want to keep it there, and then either the state or APHIS will come out and take care of it and dispose of it. Yes, so at the very least, we want it bagged. And Stephen's exactly right, and the commenter was right. There is the risk of moving this as in any time we move it. And we're searching for solutions right now. Obviously, treatment takes a little while to get going with some of the environmental compliance and a lot of that sort of things of those nature. So we're leaning toward treatments. And again, that's where we would point people for any kind of mitigation they want to take it home.
And if people did want to report, could you mention again where they could do that?
hungrypests.com is the best place to report things. It's a easy, friendly, user-friendly site.
All right, that sounds good. That looks like all that we have in the Q&A. I didn't know if there was anything else that you two would like to mention at all.
Nothing from me that hasn't been mentioned again. Just like Stephen said, we're taking this very seriously. We're throwing everything we can at it up at New York to prevent it from getting to the rest of the country. So we hope to stay ahead of this, and we need your help. If we can find the little pockets and the satellites, if they ever develop, we can eradicate them very quickly. So that's why we need your help.
And Stephen, there is one more question here. It says it's from Thomas, and Thomas says it seems like South Carolina has been really successful so far in containing the pest. Have you heard anything from any other southern states, or I guess any U.S. states about it?
Sure, I can try to tackle that one. In short, we hope we've been successful in South Carolina. That's what we pride ourselves in these emergency responses, is that early detection is key to getting these quick eradications. So in each and every state, and maybe New York is a little bit of the exception now, since they're starting to find what seems to be some established populations. But in every other state, these are all considered regulatory incidents. So really what that means is, yes, the pest was there, but it was probably contained. It doesn't mean we're going to stop looking, but it isn't considered established. So from what I'm hearing from all of the other states right now is they are pursuing trapping efforts as well. Right now, I would say we don't think there's any established populations, at least from these trace forwards. There are no established populations with the information we have right now outside of the state of New York. But we're all going to continue trapping. And now that I think there's a new spotlight shined on this pest, and again, I referenced USDA now funding box tree moth trapping in next year's CAP survey. So you're going to see a lot more states looking for it, maybe that haven't been trapping for it. So we may find it somewhere. I don't know. That's pure speculation. But now we're certainly going to be looking hard for it. We should know soon whether it's out there.
Thank you so much, Stephen. We do have one more question, and actually I'm going to ask Joe LaForest to answer this one. He's behind the scenes right now. Adam is wondering, are programs like EdMaps or iNaturalist used for citizen science? They believe that's how it was found in Ontario. So if you could talk a little bit about that, Joe.
Yep. EdMaps does have reporting for box tree moth in the smartphone apps, also for web. Those reports go through the exact same channels to the state plant health directors, state plant regulatory officials. So it's going to all go in the same path. So if that just happens to be your preferred method, great. If you're going to hungrypest.com using their forms, great. It's all headed to the same place. The biggest thing is that you do definitely report it. iNaturalist is a wonderful tool. We are pulling information through EdMaps, or from iNaturalist into EdMaps for the different verifiers to look at. But for a more immediate response, where it's going directly to the state plant regulatory officers and state plant health directors, I'd probably go with the tools meant for early detection, rapid response, hungrypest.com and EdMaps.
All right. Well, with that, I think we're at a good spot to conclude the webinar today. I would like to say thanks again to our speakers, Alan Proxmeyer at APHIS and Stephen Long at Clemson in South Carolina. Thanks to our co-director at the Southern IPM Center, Joe LaForest, who is running tech behind the scenes and answered that question about EdMaps for us. If you want to find more information about the Southern IPM Center, you can visit southernipm.org. I want to say thanks again to our partner, NAISMA, and you can find more information at naisma.org. And of course, as we've mentioned several times throughout the webinar, if you want to find out more information about invasive plant pests, including the box tree moth, please visit hungrypest.com. And we will see you at the next IPM hour, Wednesday, October 6th at 1 p.m. Eastern. Thank you so much and have a great day.